Have you ever wondered what it would look like if countries that no longer exist suddenly came back and showed up at the 2026 World Cup? What would the Yugoslavia squad look like? The Soviet Union? What about the other nations that just disappeared? In this video, we're going to look at the history of countries that don't exist anymore, but once played at the World Cup, and some of them actually made it to finals and semifinals. We'll also cover how each of these nations fell apart and what their squad would probably look like today, built from the players currently representing their successor nations. Alright, let's get into it. Starting with Yugoslavia. Even the name feels like it belongs to a different era of football, and in many ways, it does. This was a nation that, at its peak, produced some of the most technically gifted players in the world, and yet, for all that talent, never quite got the glory their game deserved. They finished in the top 4 at the very first World Cup ever played in 1930. They were runners-up at the European Championship in 1960, losing a tight final to the Soviet Union 2-1. And at the '62 World Cup in Chile, they finished 4th, bad for a country that always seemed to be one step away from the very top. Now, 3 names define this nation's footballing soul. Dragan Djigic, arguably the greatest Yugoslav player of all time. A winger so elegant that Pele once called him one of the best in the world. Then Dejan Savicevic, creative, unpredictable, the kind of player who could pull something completely out of nowhere. And Robert Prosinecki, a man who genuinely played for 2 different national teams at 2 different World Cups. Italy 90 with Yugoslavia, France 98 with Croatia. That is a level of football trivia that almost doesn't feel real. So, how did it collapse? Yugoslavia started breaking apart in the early 90s as communism crumbled across Eastern Europe. Slovenia and Croatia declared independence in 1991. Bosnia and Herzegovina followed. The wars that came after were devastating, some of the worst violence Europe had seen since the Second World War. What remained became Serbia and Montenegro. And here's one of the strangest moments in World Cup history. They qualified for the 2006 World Cup together. Then, in June of 2006, right in the middle of the group stage, Montenegro voted to declare independence. They were literally playing a World Cup as a country that no longer existed. They went out without a single point, including a 6-0 dismantling by Argentina in one of the most one-sided games of that tournament. Today, the nations born from Yugoslavia, Croatia, Bosnia, Serbia, Slovenia, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, all compete separately. And between them, the talent is awesome. So what would a combined Yugoslavia 11 look like at 2026? John Oblak in goal, a back 4 of Josip Stanisic, Nikola Milinkovic, Amir Rahmani, and Joško Gvardiol. Mateo Kovacic as the defensive midfielder, Sergej Milinkovic-Savic and Luka Modric in the center, Ivan Perisic and Martin Batorina on the wings. Edin Dzeko up front. That is a genuinely scary football team. Modric orchestrating from midfield. Gvardiol, one of the best left backs in world football, right now covering the flank. Oblak, one of the greatest keepers of the last 10 years behind them. Would they win the World Cup? Probably not. But a quarterfinal, maybe a semifinal or runner-up. Absolutely. Now let's talk about the other giant of Eastern European football that simply stopped existing. Soviet Union, 15 republics, 290 million people. The largest country in human history, and for about 3 decades, one of the most powerful footballing forces on the continent. They won the very first European Championship in 1960, beating Yugoslavia, in that final 2-1. They were runners-up at the Euros in 64, 72, and 88. 4 finals in 1 competition. At the World Cup, their best result was 4th place at England 66. 3 legends worth knowing. Lev Yashin the Black Spider, widely considered the greatest goalkeeper in the history of football. Full stop. Then Oleg Blokin the explosive striker, Ballon d'Or winner in 75, and Igor Bulanov, another Ballon d'Or, 1986, the year of Maradona. That tells you everything about the level he was at. The USSR formally dissolved on the 25th of December, 1991. 15 republics became independent nations overnight. Russia, Ukraine, Georgia, Armenia. The Central Asian states, the Baltic countries, the end of an empire. And today, of course, Russia and Ukraine are at war. A brutal, ongoing conflict that has cost countless lives and reshaped an entire continent. It feels strange mentioning it in a football video. When we're imagining players from both nations pulling on the same shirt, the weight of that history is impossible to ignore. Well, now I'm going to show what the Soviet Union's possible national team would look like if the country still existed and they were playing in the 2026 World Cup, which would be quite unlikely since the Soviet Union would probably refuse to play in the tournament given that it's being held on America. Their 2026 squad: Mamardashvili in goal, Georgia; Kuzanov at right back, Uzbekistan; Osipенко and Zabarny as the center backs, Russia and Ukraine, side by side on the pitch; Mykolenko at left back, Ukraine; Shiparenko as the defensive midfielder, Ukraine; Golovin and Mkhitaryan in central midfield, Russia and Armenia; Sigankov and Kvaratskhelia on the wings, Ukraine and Georgia; Dovbyk leading the line, Ukraine. Does this team challenge for the title? Probably not. Does this team reach the quarterfinals comfortably? Semis, if Kvaratskhelia is on form, and Oblak, sorry, Mamardashvili is saving everything. I'm not saying no. Well, now. Czechoslovakia. A different kind of story. The quiet achievers, the team that kept showing up to finals and losing them. 1934, World Cup final in Rome. They're leading Italy 1-0 with 11 minutes to go. 11 minutes, Italy equalize. Extra time, Italy score again. 2-1, Czechoslovakia runners-up. 1962, World Cup final at Chile. 3-1 to Brazil, runners-up again. 2 finals, 2 losses. But then 1976, European Championship final against West Germany. Penalties, and Antonin Panenka walked up, chipped the ball down the middle of the goal, and changed football forever. They call it the Panenka now. They will always call it the Panenka. That one moment of extraordinary composure belongs to Czechoslovakia permanently. The other legends: Josef Masapist, Ballon d'Or in 62, a midfielder who could pass, press, and think faster than almost anyone of his era. And František Planička, the goalkeeper of that 34 side, regarded by many as the best goalkeeper in the world at that time. Now, the split. And this is where Czechoslovakia's story diverges from almost everything else we're covering today. Because there was no war, no violence, no chaos. On the 1st of January 1993, the Czech Republic and Slovakia simply agreed to separate. The Velvet Divorce. They shook hands, divided the assets, and got on with it. In a century where almost every border change came with bloodshed, it is actually remarkable. Now I'm going to show what the Czechoslovakia national team could look like for the 2026 World Cup if the country still existed. Dubravka in goal, Kufel and Henko as fullbacks, Vavro, Valjant, Krejci at defense, Souček and Lobotka in midfield, Glojek and Pruvod wide. Schick is the striker. And I'll be honest, this is a good team, but it's not a great one. Lobotka is world class in the right system. Schick, when fully fit, is a genuine goal scorer. But if I had to call it, last 16, maybe the quarters on a brilliant day. Now before we get into the two Germanys, I want to address something quickly. Germany as a nation has always existed. It's not like Yugoslavia or the Soviet Union, which simply ceased to be. But from 1949 to 1990, Germany was physically divided into 2 separate states, West Germany and East Germany, each with its own government, its own identity, and yes, its own football team. Both competed internationally, both played at World Cups. But technically, for the purposes of this video, they absolutely belong here. West Germany, if you're looking for the most consistently dominant international football nation in history, the conversation starts here. From 1950 to 1990, West Germany were almost never bad at a tournament. 3 World Cup titles, 3 runner-up spots, 2 European championships. Year after year, tournament after tournament, they found a way to compete at the very highest level. Kind of sustained excellence doesn't happen by accident. It's culture, it's infrastructure, it's mentality. 3 players who built this legacy: Franz Beckenbauer, the Kaiser, a libero who played the position with such intelligence and elegance that he essentially redefined what a defender could be. Then managed West Germany to a second World Cup title in 1990. As a player and manager combined, his footprint on this sport is enormous. Gerd Müller, 68 international goals. If you want to understand what elite finishing looks like in its purest form, watch Müller. Economy of movement, perfect positioning, ruthless execution. In Rummenigge, power, pace, and an ability to perform in the biggest moments that only certain players ever truly possess. Wall fell on the 9th of November, 1989. And the detail that I always come back to as a history lover, Germany officially reunified on the 3rd of October, 1990. They'd already won the World Cup in Italy that summer, still as West Germany. They lifted the trophy in Rome. And then months later, they ceased to exist as a separate nation. What a way to go out. West Germany, 2026. And just to be clear about how we're building this squad, these are all current German players who were born in cities that were part of the old West Germany. No Eastern-born players here. That comes in the next squad. Neuer in goal, still at whatever age, carrying that presence. Kimmich, Rudiger, Tah, Ram across the back. I'll say this, Rudiger at Real Madrid this season has been exactly the kind of commanding center back you want at a World Cup. Gundogan anchoring, Wirtz and Musiala in the engine room, and these two together, I genuinely think this is one of the most exciting midfield partnerships in world football. Gnabry and Brandt wide, and Havertz through the middle. And then the other Germany, the one that gets forgotten, the East Germany. They played just one World Cup, 1974, hosted in the most perfectly dramatic geographical coincidence by West Germany. The two Germanys drawn in the same group. And in Hamburg on the 22nd of June, Jürgen Sparwasser received a pass, held off his marker, and scored. 1-0. East Germany beat West Germany at a World Cup on West German soil. Now, I want you to sit with that for a moment, because this wasn't just a football result. This was a Cold War event. Two ideological systems, two versions of the same nation, playing a football match with the entire world watching, and the East won. For 90 minutes on that day, everything the West German political and cultural project claimed to represent was on the back foot. Sparwasser's goal mattered beyond football in a way that very few goals ever have. East Germany went out in the second round. Nobody really remembers that. They remember the goal. Three names worth carrying. Joachim Streich, the all-time leading scorer for the GDR, underrated in the wider football conversation. Very much known and respected by people who study this period properly. Hans-Jürgen Dörner, a sweeper of genuine European quality. And Lutz Eigendorf, who defected to West Germany in 1980 at significant personal risk because he wanted the freedom to play football and live without state surveillance. Football and politics completely inseparable. East Germany, 2026. Same rule applies. These are current players born in cities that were part of the old East Germany. The other side of the wall. Mantle in goal. Cruiser Friedrich Müller, Sebastian May, Mittelstadt across the back, Andrich anchoring, Haber and Arnold in midfield. Toni Kroos is the attacking midfielder in the former East, and Kutschke and Shade up front. Toni Kroos, born in Greifswald on the eastern side of that wall just 1 year after it came down. Yes, he's retired now, and no, he wouldn't actually be playing in 2026, but I had to include him here because the detail is too good to ignore. If the wall had never fallen, if East Germany still existed today, Kroos is their player. The greatest German midfielder of his generation belongs to the East. That alone makes this hypothetical worth having. But here's where I'll allowed to be straightforward with you. I'm glad the reunification happened. The fall of the Berlin Wall was a real civilizational moment. A genuinely good thing in a century that didn't always produce many of those. I love this hypothetical because the football is fascinating. But one Germany free, unified, that's better than any football result. The actual history is more interesting than the counterfactual. Honorable mentions, two quick ones before we wrap up. The Dutch East Indies played at the 1938 World Cup. One game, lost 6-0 to Hungary and went home. That territory became Indonesia. And Zaire, 1974. A team that became famous partly for the 9-0 loss against Yugoslavia in that World Cup. But they were there, and that matters. Zaire became the Democratic Republic of Congo in 1997, a country with an extraordinary football culture that the world has never fully seen at its best. The Republic of Congo is also going to the 2026 World Cup. And honestly, as someone who follows African football more closely than most people in this space, I'm excited to watch the African national teams. So, the question I'll leave you with, Yugoslavia or the Soviet Union? For you, who goes furthest at 2026? For me, it's Yugoslavia. and it's not particularly close. Oblak in goal, Vardiol at left back, Modric and Milinkovic-Savic in midfield. Dzeko up front. That squad has balance, experience, and individual quality in every single position. The Soviet Union would be extraordinary to watch. Kvaratskhelia alone makes them worth buying a ticket for. But Yugoslavia is the pick. Let me know in the comments if football mixed with geography is your thing. There's more on the channel that goes even deeper into this. Subscribe if you haven't already, leave a like if you enjoyed this one, and go check out the next video. See you there.